Who can take a flower, roll it up and make it fine, sprinkle it with knowledge and a little bit of time, cover it with headlines and a sweet euphoria too. Cannabis Man, Cannabis Man, Cannabis Man, spreading news and joy across the land, diving deep into the growing green. Cannabis Man, we're all king. Ooh yeah, ooh yeah.
Hello, and welcome into another episode of the Cannabis Man Podcast. Thank you so much for clicking on the show. I am your host, Don Kleppin, and if it's your first time here, thanks for checking it out. This is a show where we're trying to take a more neutral view or journalistic view of legal cannabis around the United States and the world at large, as it has been legalized slowly recreationally since 2014 in the U.S., obviously longer in some other places like Amsterdam, and over the years, the past decade, plenty more places have added themselves to the ranks of the green frontier, let's say. I'm a broadcaster by trade in Chicago. I do news and traffic on the radio, and I'm a personal cannabis user of about 20 years or so, and I've been studying it more in detail the last few years since I started this show, and I mainly did that because I wanted to bring conversations to people that I wasn't seeing materialize in the mainstream media, conversations that I was hoping would evolve from the Cheech and Chong jokes and the leftover propaganda from last century, and talking more about the potential quality of life improvements, what medical benefits cannabis can offer, or what people lean on it for aside from just looking for a party buzz. And those conversations still have not materialized, and that is ultimately why I decided to start the Cannabis Man Podcast. I want you to know, if it is your first time here, that I am pro-cannabis, but I'm not sitting here preaching that it's right for everybody. I don't believe it is. I don't think it's some miracle cure or a panacea that can cure all your ills. But there are many people who have found that it does help with a critical quality of life problem that they've had. Myself, the reason I kept it a part of my life, I struggled to get to sleep at night for much of my life, and cannabis still helps with that. Other people turn to it for chronic body pain issues. If you've got joint pain in your lower back or your hips or your knees, cannabis can help with that. Anxiety, focus, stress, any of these things outside of just looking for a social buzz or a way to take the edge off at the end of the day and not lean so heavily on alcohol. All of those are things that cannabis can provide. But again, as I say, it's totally reasonable if you found cannabis is not for you. I'm not sitting here arguing that. You do you. But those of us that have found cannabis is right for us, we should be afforded the same freedoms that everybody who leans so heavily on alcohol, caffeine, sugars, cigarettes, all that stuff that people rely on to get through the day. Why doesn't cannabis get a seat at that table? That's ultimately what my opinion is. So, on to the first episode of 2025. I'm recording this January 9th. It's a dry January, my 5th since 2020. I started this. I'll get into more details a little bit later on that, but that means no cannabis along with no alcohol for me, and I'll tell you the other stuff I'm abstaining from. I'll also, like I tend to do on these shows, I'll share some news stories that I think are worth your attention, you should know about, give you a product review of something that I've been trying. I've got a great one this week, a great drink that is just fantastic. I really can't wait to tell you about it. Tried it over the holidays. Anything I talk about during this month product-wise, it's something that I tried last year. And I'll get back to trying stuff more in February once this dry January's over. But know that my opinion is coming from a recent sampling of these products, just not recent in the last 9 days. I also speak with experts in the space, whether these are entrepreneurs, business owners, people who are studying cannabis like doctors and scientists, or politicians who've been elected or appointed to run the cannabis associations and sort of the government bodies that are in charge of making or enforcing the cannabis rules in this new legal cannabis space across the states that have done so. And I'll also talk with other journalists, other people in the space, podcasters or show hosts, anybody, authors who is also covering this and who can provide some valuable information to these conversations about legal cannabis. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, you can follow the show. It's at C-Man Podcast on Twitter and Instagram, Cannabis Man Podcast Facebook page, and I'm on YouTube as well. Cannabis Man will search there and bring up the shows. I upload all these podcast episodes to it. So whatever you're listening on, if YouTube sounds better to you, you can check it out there. there. But if you are on one of the audio platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Downcast, Earwolf, Amazon, wherever you're getting this right now, wherever you're hearing my voice from, there is a function in that platform to leave a rating or a review for this show. Leave a comment. However many stars you think this is worth, I would appreciate it if you could rate and review the show. Always happy to hear comments, and be sure to share it with your friends. And last year, I also started another arm, so to speak, of this podcast, and it's a different medium. I am writing about stories that I can't cover on this weekly show through a newsletter, which you can get in your email inbox every Tuesday morning, and that newsletter is called The Weekly Chronic. And I do similar stuff to what I do on the show, which is cover news stories, product reviews, review products, talk about some perspective of the cannabis space, let you know where I think things are headed. But I know that not everybody's into podcasts. I know that sometimes listening to an hour-long show might not fit into your week. So this way you can get a newsletter right into your email inbox Tuesday morning. I usually put them out around 7 o'clock a.m. That way you can read for 5 to 10 minutes and get a little snapshot of news stories to stay on top of cannabis news throughout your week. That's a free newsletter, and you can sign up at the link below in the description notes. I hope you had a wonderful holiday and New Year. I know it's already 10 days into January by the time this comes out, and whenever you might be listening to this, it might be over the weekend, it might be much, much later. But I hope any holiday that just came up, I hope you enjoy every single one and got to spend some time with people that you're close with, that you care about, that you love, because those connections, I firmly believe, are the reason that we're here. These relationships we form with people, the ties that bind, the purpose of life is a very debatable topic, and God knows people spend a lot of time doing that. My opinion is just simply that I think we're meant to meet other people, to socialize with them, to form bonds. And once you do, spend time with those people, because our time is limited. And in my opinion, a great way to form new bonds or, grease the wheels of the established ones, sort of deepen the ones you already have, is by sharing some cannabis with them. In the meantime, I've got a lot to get to. This is a packed episode. Again, the first of 2025. Lots to talk about from stuff I didn't get to over the holiday break. So let's crack this thing open on the Cannabis Man Podcast. Hit it.
This is Tommy Chong, and you're listening to the Cannabis Podcast.
Yes, sir. And I want to thank you again for listening to the show. We're in it now properly, and I want to start by talking about Dry January. This may be something you're partaking in yourself right now, or maybe you're listening to this in February and it's already over. That's totally fine too. But I've been doing this now for 5 years. I went into detail on this week's issue of the Weekly Chronic, which I mentioned at the top. You can check out the issue below. I've linked it there. I go into some of the benefits that I have found myself, some of the things that I lean on to help get me through it. It is definitely tough. There's no doubt about that. Anytime you make a change to your routine, anytime you kind of, take a break from some substances you lean on, God knows, anybody out there who leans on cannabis, especially on a daily basis, you may know exactly how hard it is to give it a rest. I think there are a lot of people out there who are interested in tolerance breaks, and I say that because my tolerance break episodes tend to be some of my most popular. So if you're listening to this and a tolerance break, or a tea break, as people in the space sometimes call it, if that sounds appealing to you, but you don't know how to go about it, you can get a lot of detail on this week's Weekly Chronic, but I'll give you sort of a shorter rundown right here. And I'll start by telling you what I'm abstaining from totally. I modify Dry January. For most people, it's just cutting out alcohol. I'm not a big drinker. Haven't been for some time. I still indulge. I certainly still imbibe. Over the holidays, at a social occasion like a wedding. I'm Wisconsin born, okay? A Manhattan, a bourbon or a brandy Manhattan is always going to call my name. But that being said, these days, as a 37-year-old man with a wife and now almost 9-month-old daughter, I'm just not drinking as much as I used to. And cannabis scratches that itch for me. Something I've talked about a lot on the show, where cannabis is legalized, rates of alcohol consumption drop. It's just seemingly a fact of life. It's been proven 6 ways to Sunday. So I won't belabor that point. What I will say is that I cut out alcohol and cannabis, as well as caffeine and added sugars. Last year, I cut out meat as well. Not doing that this year. Didn't feel the need to torture myself any more than I already am. So I'm just going about it the way that I typically do. The reason, I just mentioned I'm not a big alcohol drinker. The reason that I still cut it out, though, is because when I'm abstaining from cannabis, if I do have a drink, it's much more likely that I'm going to smoke, that my willpower will break down, that my resolve will falter. So I cut out alcohol as well, and that just kind of tends to go well with the cannabis break too. The caffeine and added sugars, where do those fit in? Well, as I mentioned on many of these shows, and I did in the open here, sleep is a huge reason that I lean on cannabis, getting to sleep at night. And so without cannabis, that can be a little difficult for me. And so cutting out stimulants that I regularly consume, I found to be a helpful way of getting down a little bit at the end of the day. That's where cutting out caffeine as well as added sugars kind of came into the picture here. And all of that being said, I'll tell you what I tell everybody. The caffeine is the hardest part. As strange as that might sound, especially from somebody doing a cannabis podcast who consumes, on a regular basis. The caffeine cutting out, there's real withdrawal from that. The first 2 or 3 days, and this year for me, it was day 3. January 3rd was a Friday this year, and it was hell. There was a headache that I had. If you've ever cut out caffeine or sugar or whatever, you'll know what I'm talking about. It kind of pinches your temples. It's there at the base of your skull, and it doesn't matter what you do. That thing haunts you all day, and there's really nothing you can get out of. You can't get away from it. I exercise every day, and more so during these tea breaks, but that didn't help anything. Drank lots of water, took painkillers. I ended up just going to bed early, and thankfully I woke up on the 4th day and I got past it. And I'll tell you, that is always the most difficult part of these dry Januaries for me, those first 2 to 3 days, and it's mainly the caffeine that's tough. The rest of it for me is just kind of shaking up the routine. The cravings for cannabis absolutely do come. There's no doubt about that. One trick that I do at the very beginning, December 31st, I get rid of all my cannabis supply. There is nothing in this house right now that is THC or CBD. There's nothing in here that has either one of those compounds in it. So New Year's Eve, I still had a pack of pre-rolls that I had bought previously, had a nice dinner. Gretchen, myself, and Violet went up to my sister Kelly's. We had some Lou Malnati's deep dish pepperoni pizza for dinner. Fan-freaking-tastic, always hits the spot. Drove back home. We're home by about 9 o'clock. And we, stayed up to watch the ball drop and all that. I smoked my pack of pre-rolls throughout the day. And the last 3 of them, I smoked between 9 and midnight. And it was wonderful. I loved it. It was a great after dinner. Had my nice after dinner smoke. Put Violet to bed. Had a little smoke after that. Then at 11:30, I went outside, freezing. As usual, that's another thing I don't miss during these dry months is stepping outside in the winter to smoke, feeling it cut into the lungs and all that. Definitely don't miss that at the moment. That being said, I miss the smoking, but not smoking in the cold. I think anybody will tell you that just sucks. But anyway, I smoked the 3. That was the remainder of my supply. Then I was cleared out. So my tip for those of you interested in starting a tea break, choose an amount of time that you think you can do. It doesn't matter if it's 1 day. Give it a try. I think you'll find you can go a little bit further than you realized or that you thought before you gave it a shot. The first time I ever tried doing this, I did it for 3 days. Then I went for a week, and then I went for 3 weeks. And now I have to tell you, these dry Januaries are really not as difficult as you might think to get through. I mentioned the exercise. I do that every day. I also meditate. I've talked about that on previous episodes. I use a free app called Insight Timer. Not affiliated with them in any way, but I just set a little music bed with the sound of a rushing river and some birds chirping and some wind chimes. And, I just put that on in my headphones. There's a 10-minute timer, and I just close my eyes wherever I am, take a deep breath through the nose, out through the mouth. And the thoughts are always going to come. We all have busy minds. We're all assaulted by stimuli on a regular basis. The main point of those 10 minutes is to just try and clear the mind. Thoughts come, take a breath, try and focus on your breath in. You can count if you want to, if that helps. But basically, you're just trying to, do an exercise of keeping your mind clear. And then the next thought comes up. And then you clear it. And rinse, repeat for 10 minutes. That is how I go through my meditation. I do that after my morning workout, and then I come upstairs and I take a 3-minute cold shower. Is it fun? No, it's never fun. I often sit outside the shower while the cold water's running, psyching myself up to get in there, still. And I've been doing this for about 2 years. But I do 3 minutes, and then I turn on the warm water, and then I just take a shower like normal. And we're good to go. And I love the way that I feel after doing that. So that morning routine, exercise, 10 minutes of meditation, cold shower for 3 minutes. Then I'm pretty good dealing with the stress and anxieties throughout the day. For the rest of the day, I'm drinking a lot of tea. Not something I normally do as I'm having my coffee and stuff like that, but in the wintertime, I have found it to be really, really helpful. All these teas are caffeine-free, obviously. There is a tea that I kind of use as a coffee replacement called Teeccino, Teeccino. I find them on Amazon. Not affiliated with them either. But they have a 12-pack, a variety pack, which you can find for about $10. And I brew that in the morning, and it's caffeine-free, it's acid-free, it's sugar-free, it's vegan-friendly, if that matters to you at all. There's no GMOs in it. But what ends up happening, a lot of them are made with dandelion, and then there's other things in there like mocha mint, coconut, caramel nut. They have these different things along with the dandelion. It ends up coming out looking like coffee, and it even smells a little like it too. Not nearly the same, not nearly close enough as I'd like, but it's enough to sort of satisfy my brain's craving for that. That's how I have it in the morning. And then the rest of the day, if I feel an itch, to consume some cannabis, I'll brew some green tea. And the act of brewing the tea, meditative, I do not a proper meditation, but I do some breathing. And then I just sip on the tea and go about my day. Something I've found doing these tea breaks is that cravings pass. It can be intense for the moment that it's there, but if you can just kind of grit it out, take a deep breath, focus, remember why you're doing it in the first place, and then ideally distract yourself with something else or find an alternative like tea, and it'll pass. And then you go about your day. And so it's really just a matter of fighting the battle of will in those moments. It's not constant. It's not like the 31 days of January are a constant misery. It's just little moments throughout the day. You can handle it. If I can, anybody can. And then for the night, in addition to that, removing stimulants and the exercise and all that kind of stuff, exercise, by the way, does help getting to sleep. So there's that. But then, of course, there's sleepy time tea. No melatonin. I'm not relying on it. No Ambien, none of that stuff. But there is just bedtime or sleepy time tea. They've got different stuff in them. After meals, when I also like to smoke, they have digestive teas like peppermint or ginger or fennel. They've got different stuff in these teas, and they have ones to help you get to sleep at night. So I've been leaning pretty heavily on those. And if it's a tough day and you're really stressing, 2 bags. 2 bags of tea, make it really strong, and knock yourself out for the evening. that is ultimately how I've been getting through my dry January. So I hope that helps you a little bit. And there's more information, as I said, in the Weekly Chronic about specifically my routine, along with the benefits that I've enjoyed, one of which is weight loss. And that is something, I don't know if it's, the added sugars along with the alcohol, but no cannabis means I'm not snacking as much outside of meals. I'm not eating as late at night. And I'm recording this January 9th. I'm already down 8 pounds. So make of that what you will. I'm not making any kind of guarantees of what it'll work for you, but that's a benefit that I come to rely on every January. We all gain a little weight in the holidays. Doing a dry January is a great way to immediately take it off and start the new year off right. Now I'd like to move on to the News Joint Wrap. This is a wrap-up of news stories in and around Illinois, all brought to you by IllinoisNewsJoint.com. Think of it as the joint you can hit for all your Illinois cannabis news and reviews. And I want to start with a very big story here around Illinois. Jason Brown of the News Joint did a great expose on this, and I, in the newsroom at WGN Radio and elsewhere, have reached out to both parties in this, but the main thing to take away is that the Illinois governor, J.B. Pritzker, and the Chicago mayor, Brandon Johnson, have been battling over a hemp General Assembly bill. Two, in fact, competing intoxicating hemp regulation bills, as Jason notes in this article, failed to reach the floor for a vote after a lame duck session battle pitted Pritzker against Chicago Mayor Johnson. Pritzker representing folks in the regulated cannabis industry, Johnson representing the hemp industry side of things. These are House Bills 4293 and 5903. 4293 was supported by Pritzker. It would have essentially banned retail sales of intoxicating hemp products in Illinois. On December 13th, Pritzker blamed intoxicating hemp for harming children and hurting the regulated cannabis industry. And during the lame duck session, Pritzker called on House lawmakers to pass the bill. After a roll call during a 4-day session, Pritzker believed he had the votes, but after a few House members claimed they'd been excluded from the hemp negotiations, Pritzker was informed he did not have the votes to pass it. Now, I reached out to Governor Pritzker's camp. I reached out to his communications director, who was kind enough to provide to me this statement. On the record, quote, Governor Pritzker is disappointed that lawmakers failed to take bipartisan, common-sense action to protect children and the public from unregulated and untested hemp products. The governor is never beholden to special interests and will always put people, especially children, over politics and profits, end quote. That is a statement from Governor Pritzker's press secretary on behalf of the governor. And how about this timing? Just got a response, actually, from Mayor Brandon Johnson's people, also providing a statement here, a bit lengthier than Governor Pritzker's, but bear with me just for the sake of fairness here. Quote, this week, the Ill General Assembly's House Democrats remain steadfast in their commitment to young people as it relates to the necessary regulation of hemp, Delta-8, and synthetic intoxicants. The work to address safety and regulation at state and local levels related to hemp continues. Our communities require legislation that addresses concerns related to minor consumption, as well as opportunities for regulation that support entrepreneurs and municipalities, said Mayor Johnson. It goes on, ensuring a diversity of voices are present in the discussion will help to avoid unintended consequences and arrive at an agreement on safety goals that preserve local flexibility. And further, the leadership of the Chicago delegation in Springfield was critical in ensuring the communities of Chicago and other municipalities were central to the conversation. My team remains eager to be at the table with partners to develop and pass legislation that appropriately regulates hemp products. Because our young people are depending on us, we must prioritize communities while ensuring our negotiations do not unnecessarily create winners and losers in the industry. Mercifully, end of statement. So, very similar there. You heard it here first. Both the mayor and governor responding to the General Assembly's failure to pass any sort of hemp regulatory bill this week. But I'll tell you what it looks like to me right now and what it looks like to a lot of people on both sides of this. By pushing for an outright ban, it looks like Governor Pritzker is on the side of the big MSOs, the multi-state cannabis operators. And on the other side, it looks like Johnson is for the status quo with the unregulated hemp industry. Now, I've talked with a lot of people about these topics on the show here. My opinion about this is as follows. The states which have legalized cannabis, regular old cannabis, THC, up to however many percentage points it gets up to, they have done so with a regulated, heavily regulated and taxed system. And most importantly, I would say that system comes with accountability for people who violate it. Anybody who makes bad cannabis products gets fined, can get shut down. There is a way to hold them accountable for bad actions. That does not exist on the hemp side of things. The 2018 Farm Bill, which is still in effect, created a loophole where any hemp products, and by the way, hemp and cannabis are the same plant. One's female, one's male. You can quibble biologically, but they're the same plant. And for the purposes of legalization, any of those plants or any products which have higher than 0.3% THC, those fall under cannabis and all the regulations that come with it. Those under that threshold or that make use of synthetic cannabinoids like Delta-8, THCA, any one of these things, which is really just a slight chemical alteration of THC, those are unregulated. Nobody's looking into those. There is no system of accountability for bad actors in that space. That needs to change. People quibble about the marketing to children. I will say I've walked into some of these hemp shops, and there is packaging that looks unmistakably like very popular products that kids would enjoy. I'm talking like Oreos. I'm talking mac and cheese Jolly Ranchers. I'm talking soda. These hemp products that are made to look like those are out there. There's no question about it. They're there. I've seen them. If you don't think those are being marketed at kids, that's fine. That's debatable. I get it. But the fact is, kids can walk into those shops and they can buy them. And if a parent wants to get that head shop shut down, there is no legal recourse to do that unless you take the business owner to court at your own expense and all of that. So my point is, this system is unsustainable. You've got all these cannabis business owners jumping through the legal loops or hoops or whatever you want to call it. They're jumping through those things because they've been made to. And as I said, there's a whole system in place to hold them accountable if they don't do well. We need the same thing for hemp makers. God knows I have interviewed hemp product makers on this show who are responsible, who are making great products, who should not be shut down. But I think they would be happy to submit to the kind of regulation that cannabis businesses have had to do so as well. Free market means even playing field. That's what I say. Cannabis product makers, hemp product makers should be held to the same standard. I don't think that's radical. I don't think that's an unreasonable position. That's where I stand on this. As I said, I reached out to both Mayor Johnson and Governor Pritzker. I hope they come on the show to explain this a little more in detail. But for the meantime, let me know what you think about this. If you're in Illinois, if you're in a different state where maybe only hemp products are legal and you really like those, let me know what you think. Scroll down, hit the Text Cannabis Man link in the description notes. I want more opinions about this because this is an important debate that we're having right now. It's playing out before our eyes in the Illinois legislature, and something's got to give here. And you can find out more details as well on that article at IllinoisNewsJoint.com. Jason also does great product reviews, including Baccio Belts by Northern Heights, Pink Runts by Connect Wellness, Animal Mint Cake by Grassroots, and a dispensary spotlight of Bisa Lena Dispensary in Carroll Stream. And one event I'll mention that's on IllinoisNewsJoint.com, Stash is hosting a New Year New Craft Grows event this Saturday, January 11th. It's at the Stash Social Lounge, and it's an open consumption cannabis event. Oh, I love those. Those are a lot of fun. If you haven't been to them, check this one out. Focused on Illinois craft growers and infusers. It's running from 12 to 4 p.m. January 11th. Tickets are free to enter. So you can find all of that and more at IllinoisNewsJoint.com. Now I'd like to get into my product of the week, and as I mentioned at the top, this is a product I tried over the holiday break because I'm doing my tea break at the moment, but I want to tell you about a drink maker. This is a product I haven't talked about on the show before, but I'm going to interview the CEO of the company, so I'll be talking in more detail about their products, but the one I want to talk to you about, the overall company is called Happy, Happi. Happy. And these drinks are available wherever you are because you can order them online. These were shipped right to me, and I believe they're headquartered in New York. I might be wrong about that, but they're not headquartered in Illinois. So that's worth noting as well. If you want to try these, you're free to do so right now. The specific drink under the Happy brand that I want to tell you about is called Dance. It's a THC seltzer, like all of Happy's products. And I just want to stop for a moment on the company and the drink name here. That means that this drink that I was sipping on over the holiday break is called Happy Dance. Is there a more joyful product name out there? I mean, it was fantastic. So I love that, and I love a lot of the marketing that Happy's done so far. But I'll tell you a little about the drink. These come in either 8 or 12-ounce cans. The Happy Dances that I got were 8-ounce cans. The flavor of Dance is mango, sweet basil. Delicious. Absolutely delicious. These go for a price of about $26 a pack, which, like a lot of cannabis products, it is pricey. It's not an alcohol six-pack, I'll tell you that, but they often run sales on the website. If you just Google Happy THC drinks, it'll come up. But the pairing of juicy mango and the unique herbal zest of sweet basil, I thought was a real winner. And the best part of this, it's not just THC that's in these. There is also CBD and THCV in these Happy Dance drinks. And the effects, as such, are perfect for celebrating. When I first drank this, the first can that I had, my wife Gretchen and I were doing chores around the condo here. We were doing some laundry, whatever. We get into the elevator and we're going down to the laundry room on the second floor. And we both just started dancing in the elevator. I was doing like some legitimately goofy Jack Black twitchy moves. Now, maybe this isn't a selling point. I'm saying this out loud right now. Maybe this is not something you want to experience. I will tell you that my experience was incredibly positive. I was, it wasn't as if I just did a bump of cocaine or anything like that, or like I smoked a cigarette. It wasn't a major stimulant, but it was a slow onset of a nice boost of energy. I could see this being absolutely perfect for a party atmosphere. This is the kind of thing I would love to sip on at a party or chug at a wedding before hitting the dance floor. Makes you feel light on your feet, makes you feel joyful, laughs come easy, stress is far in the rear view. I just really enjoyed this. This is something that I think everybody should try. I think they're doing great things with these Happy drinks, and this Happy Dance specifically, you got to give it a shot. And let's keep this conversation about THC seltzers going. You know I love them. I've talked about different ones on the show before. I think they fill a great space in our society, especially if you're looking for an alcohol alternative. And there is another company making some great THC seltzers, the CEO of which is my expert guest this week. Listener, welcome back. My guest today has a fascinating story to tell. He's got a really interesting perspective in the cannabis space, as well as some of the tech that's being used to innovate, especially in the beverage space. You've heard me talk a lot about cannabis beverages. It's one of the most exciting pieces, the most exciting arms of this new legal cannabis industry. I think some of the innovation there is amazing, and I also have talked about how I think that the beverages particularly fill this social role that alcohol has for so many years. It's very, very exciting to me to see now these cannabis beverages popping up in different places, in bars and liquor stores and in social gatherings, because I think that anybody who's ever tried to take a dry month like I have, or who's tried to step away from alcohol for a while, people notice when you're at the party, when you're at the bar, if you don't have a drink in your hand, people do tend to draw attention to it, ask you why, and sometimes even try and steer you you back in the direction of drinking for whatever reason. And I just love so much that there are a lot of great options in the cannabis world that are providing an option for people who don't necessarily want to drink. And I think that there's been some amazing work on that front, and nobody is doing it better than WYNK. I talked before about WYNK. If you've heard recent episodes of mine, the THC seltzer products that they've put out are second to none in my opinion. And I loved the number one flavor of theirs for me was black cherry for a long time until they released this new flavor, very Halloween themed, perfect for October. I'm talking about the cran blood orange flavor. And I'm here to talk a little more about that with my guest today, as well as some of what makes WYNK different in terms of how they are making these drinks and the tech that they use to mobily distribute it state by state, which is something that not a lot of other cannabis companies are able to do. And that today, my guest is the CEO of WYNK Seltzer, Angus Rittenberg. Welcome, Angus. Thanks for joining today.
Thank you, Don, and thanks for the kind words on our new flavor.
Oh, my pleasure, man. I really do. I want to get into your background and everything, but let me just start with the cran blood orange, because not just blowing smoke there. I think that the flavors that you guys have in your other seltzers are fantastic, and like I said, the black cherry was great for me, but this cran blood orange is like the number one flavor of any of these THC seltzers that I have tried, and I've been anxious to talk to you because I know it's a limited time flavor, but I'm really hoping that maybe there are some plans to keep this around going forward. What's been the response from the new flavor so far?
The feedback's been really strong, and it's been fun for us because it's our first limited time offer, a seasonal flavor. It'll be available until we run out. So we did a limited run. Expect, we'll sell probably for the next month or so. But we do plan on introducing more limited time offerings throughout the year, with the turn of each season. And the goal really is to we have our core flavors that have always been strong and we've had great feedback on. But as we increase distribution, we can start to focus more on introducing new flavors. And these LTOs are great just to keep, our distributors excited and kind of on their toes for what's next, but also give consumers, reasons to keep coming back to WYNK and looking for, the next new thing that we put out. The cran blood orange, fall flavor, just trying to meet the occasion for the holidays, but true to WYNK, 0 calories, 0 sugar, no hangover, and a light social buzz, much like beer or wine. But the feedback has been phenomenal from consumers. And many people love our black cherry. That's a common thing that we hear. A lot of those people now have a new favorite in the cran blood orange.
Yeah, right on. And I'm on that list as well. And I've told the story on the podcast before, Angus, but my dad, who's not a cannabis consumer in any way, I gave him a pack of the black cherry WYNKs, and he just loved them and has totally been looking forward to trying more, and also was really geeked about the cran blood orange. So what you guys are doing is great. You mentioned the 0 calories, 0 sugar. I was reading through the nutrition label on a recent episode. It's got all zeros in the best way, and I just think that that's such a great standard to set, because alcohol or not, even if you're drinking soft drinks here, there's sugar in so much of what we just put into our bodies. It's kind of it's so rampant, especially here in the U.S. I know that the FDA just recently changed their their advice for how much you can have in a day, and I still think that's too much. It's like 37 grams or something like that, and if you actually look at the amount of 37 grams in front of you of sugar, you'd be like, oh my God, that's still a lot of sugar to be putting in a body in a day. So I love that WYNK, all your drinks have none of that, which is awesome. But you touched on the tech that you guys have, which allows for you to do some of these limited time offers state by state. And I've talked with other business owners in the cannabis space, because each state is kind of its own island in cannabis law right now. It's so hard to do products across state state lines. And yet WYNK has been really successful, not just in Illinois, obviously, but in Minnesota. I know, I'm pretty sure you guys are in Michigan as well, and other states with cannabis markets legally here. And so if you can, from a tech perspective, I know that you were an engineer with Tesla and SpaceX, so your perspective on the tech that WYNK is using is really valuable here. So if you can, tell us what it is that WYNK that allows you guys to kind of distribute as guerrilla style and as quickly as you are able to.
Yeah, the story of the technology is somewhat long and reasonably complicated, but
sure.
Maybe I'll start at the beginning and explain why there was ever a need for tech and then how that's evolved over the years. So when we started the company in early 2021, we could only sell these beverages through dispensaries. And that was because the THC in the drinks was derived from marijuana. And marijuana is a form of cannabis. Hemp is also a form of cannabis. Marijuana is regulated on a state-by-state basis, and it's still federally illegal.
Right.
But what that means is you cannot ship products that have THC derived from marijuana across state lines. So in 2021, we could only sell products with THC derived from marijuana. And because we couldn't ship them across state lines, we had to produce the drinks in every market that we sold.
Right.
And so what that meant was we either had to go out and get cannabis processing licenses in each state, build facilities in each state. But when you ran the financial models, it made no sense. You're never going to pay off those licenses and those facilities. So when we started, we actually started because we had an idea for a technology, and the technology was going to solve that problem. What we ended up doing was creating something where we take traditional beverage cans and we put a small one-way valve in the bottom of them, and then we fill them with no THC at our facility. So we can produce, in one facility in the US, products at scale. And we're only dependent on one facility. Now, they're undosed at the facility, and therefore, because they have no THC in them, they can be shipped across state lines. The innovation we did to sort of solve this THC problem was a very small dosing system that you can then take these undosed cans with the valve and just inject THC in the markets. Mm-hmm. So the early business model was, rather than go out and get our own licenses, let's partner with existing license holders that have facilities. They have no beverage equipment, but we'll bring our little dosing machine that just plugs into the wall. We'll produce all the cans at our facility, very advanced canning facility that runs, 1,000 plus cans a minute. Run them all there undosed, ship them to our partners that have licenses in each individual market, and then just inject the THC on site, and then they can go for testing and be sold in the market. So that was, the initial premise of the business. Let's create this technology, solve this production problem for beverages. We needed to create a brand so that we had a product to sell, and that's where WYNK came from. And in the early days, the goal really was create a low dose beverage that's approachable to the alcohol consumer, not cannabis consumer, but alcohol consumer. Put them in dispensaries, and then do a lot of sort of awareness marketing to get alcohol consumers into the dispensary. What we found in the first couple of years is it's very hard to do. It's very hard to get alcohol consumers, one, to try cannabis, but even harder to get them to go to make a separate stop at a dispensary. So we sort of shifted. We continued to produce WYNK and low dose beverages, but we created another brand called Countdown. And Countdown was really targeted to the cannabis consumer, much higher doses. And that's done well in the dispensary channel. What happened about a year and a half ago is Minnesota sort of codified a regulatory structure for the state of Minnesota that allowed beverages with THC derived from hemp, which is federally legal, to be sold through the BevAlc channel. So in Minnesota, a market was created where instead of putting these low-dose THC beverages in dispensaries, you could actually, for the first time, sell them through liquor stores. So now you can put these low-dose products that we designed from the start to be compelling to alcohol consumers, you can put them right at the retailer they're already going to. And that sort of created a domino effect of similar models being created in other states. But because these products were now derived had THC in them that was derived from hemp, we can produce them dosed in our facility with hemp-derived THC, ship them across the country, and sell them through, beer and liquor wholesalers. So that was the fundamental shift a year and a half ago that really gave us expanded distribution and put this product in the places that our target consumers were already going. So the business as it stands today still uses that technology, and we still produce high-dose drinks and sell them through dispensaries, and we dose them in each individual market. So that's sort of one business unit. But then separately, the WYNK brand has THC that's derived from hemp, and that's produced, in huge quantities at our facility and shipped and distributed through beer wholesalers in the individual markets. Now, although WYNK is not dependent on, sort of advanced exclusive technology anymore, the thing that we do still have that's really unique is a massive production facility that we can produce very high quality product at scale at a low cost and pass those savings to consumers. So WYNK today, as it exists in liquor stores, it's very affordable. It's becoming almost directly adjacent to its alcoholic counterparts. Mm-hmm. But we're able to do that because we own production and we save a lot of cost in producing the products. So hopefully that sort of all makes sense. It's been a long journey and the business has evolved, but important to note the premise of this company in the beginning was, let's create a technology to solve a problem. It's evolved over time, and now a lot of our focus is on sales and marketing and traditional distribution. But that process of developing this technology and solving all these state-by-state issues made us extremely good at producing cannabis beverages, whether they be derived from marijuana or hemp.
Sure. Yeah. I appreciate you spelling it all out like that because it is a lot, but that context is important because, as you said, you came up in trying to solve a problem and then Minnesota changes things and all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, that problem is no longer a huge obstacle anymore, but because you guys did the work to set yourselves up to solve it, you can still use that arm of the business to sell Countdown in dispensary statewide, like you mentioned, but because you don't need to do it state by state when it's hemp-based like WYNK is, you now can just ship that out from your facility to all the different states. And that does allow for WYNK to be in the areas where, as you said, it's competing with alcohol. And I've seen it here around Chicago where I live. I've seen it at Binny's. I've seen it at grocery stores, other liquor stores. I saw it at like a market that is just a few blocks away from my condo that I share with my wife and daughter here. We were walking to get some feta, which is our favorite from this place because it's like a, sort of a Palestinian market kind of a thing. They just have the best. And if there was any place that I did not expect to see WYNK, it was there, and yet they had them. They had it there with they had the black cherry flavors, they had the mango flavor as well, and I was just really surprised to see it there and thrilled because, as you were just kind of alluding to, having these beverages on the shelves in places where alcohol drinkers are picking up their drinks, that is really what you guys were going after initially, and it's also providing that great alternative for those people where you're not asking them to make an additional trip to the dispensary. They can get WYNK where they're getting the other drinks that they would normally be getting from these places. And as you also mentioned, the price point is coming down to be comparable as well. So there's a lot of exciting things happening here, and I think the work you guys are doing is moving us forward in a way that I think should be exciting to everybody. And on the note of the tech and just really the whole hemp versus marijuana based difference, one thing I wanted to ask you too, because I've gotten this question a lot, and I find the waters are pretty murky just in general because it is federally still restricted, as we talked about, but the Farm Bill legalized hemp nationwide back in 2018, and that's the version they're still running with right now. So my question to you is, what I notice on WYNK cans is that it's 5 milligrams of THC. And I believe CBD is also in there, same amount, if I'm not mistaken. One of the things that I keep reading is that, and maybe I have this wrong, and please correct me if I do, but from what I was reading, the THC limit, even on hemp, is like 0.3%. And so my question to you is the 5 milligrams of THC versus that 0.3 limitation. How does that get squared when you guys are shipping it around to different states and stuff like that?
Yeah. So what the 2018 Farm Bill says, and the 2018 Farm Bill is the thing that said hemp is legal. What that Farm Bill is saying is there's, you have cannabis, and marijuana and hemp are both different expressions of cannabis. The Farm Bill is defining hemp as a form of cannabis that has less than 0.3% THC by dry weight.
Gotcha.
And marijuana is anything over. So the THC molecule in hemp and marijuana, it's the same, delta 9 THC is a molecule. It's the same thing. Much like with ethanol, you can derive ethanol from grain. You can also derive it from grapes. The molecule is the same, and the effect in the end products is the same. It's just two different origins.
Gotcha.
I kind of think about it in the same way. And so what we do in the WYNK formulations is just ensure that, one, the chain of custody shows that the THC we're using originates from hemp. And then the other thing is, in the final product and in the final formulation of WYNK, the THC content in the can is also under 0.3% THC by dry weight. So if you were to take all the water out of the can, we'd still be compliant per the Farm Bill. So that's sort of the way to look at it. It's all about concentration of THC. And in the case of Minnesota, that's really what they're saying is these M products, you have to stay below a certain dose per package. So for beverage, you can't be over 10 milligrams in the can, but you also have to make sure that the content of THC is under 0.3% by dry weight. So that's the distinction. But there's a lot of misuse of terms in the industry.
Sure.
I think a lot of people get confused by cannabis, marijuana, hemp, D9, Delta 9.
Yep.
There's all these different terms that are sort of misused, but at the end of the day, the molecule that you're sort of distilling out of either source, marijuana or hemp, it's the same molecule and the same effect in the end product.
Sure.
Much like ethanol and all the different sources, grain, grape, potato, all these things you can get ethanol from, and that ethanol is the same, it's just a different source.
Sure. No, I love that. And it does clarify things. I appreciate you saying that, because just even considering it where, like you said, it's the distinction in the plants themselves, cannabis plant, anything, in terms of regulation anyway, cannabis plant over 0.3% THC, hemp plants under that. And that as long as you ride that line and the way that you guys kind of do, making sure you're still compliant there, totally makes it clearer. So I do appreciate that. It does get murky, even when you say marijuana, cannabis, and it's still so new. We're only a decade into the first states doing this, that people are still very much just waking up to this. And, we're recording this on October 24th, rescheduling. That hearing isn't until December 2nd. And, if it does move from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3, then you figure the doors open more. Even more people who've never looked into it will be more curious. And these distinctions, clarifying how this all works and the nomenclature we're using, that's all really important stuff. On this note, and I've asked a couple of other business owners about this too, who deal in hemp-based products. California right now is, surprisingly, as if, any state would go through this, California is the one where their governor just issued a sort of pause anyway on hemp-based products in that state specifically. My question to you is, are you watching that, what's going on in California, and does it concern you at all in terms of if they do move in that direction of, clamping down on hemp products, does it concern you that it might sort of move elsewhere in the U.S.?
Yeah, we see a lot of variability in the state-by-state frameworks. California is a good recent example of one that took the stance that, hemp-derived THC products should not be able to be sold. Basically, any THC product should only be sold through dispensaries.
Right.
We've never sold at retail in California, partially because sort of saw this coming. It seemed like at some point this was going to happen. So fortunately, it didn't affect our business, and it also didn't affect our short-term plans. It It's interesting. I could give another example, which would be like Connecticut. And Connecticut had a market somewhat similar to Minnesota, where you could sell, we could sell our core products through the BevAlc channel. They changed the regulations at one point to say that you could only do beverages up to 3 milligrams, and they had to be in 12-ounce cans in a 4-pack, which was precisely what nobody was making.
Yeah, exactly.
And that causes a lot of problems, obviously, for many, but in our case, it actually creates great opportunity, because due to the fact that we have our own production and we have a team that's very quick, with packaging, said, well, we have a lot of demand in Connecticut. Consumers clearly want these products. So within a week or two, we changed the product and we made a compliant product to fall within their guidelines. And we were first to bring that product to market, and it gave us a lot of shelf space very quickly, because we were the only ones. So I think the point is, there's states like California that have a complete ban. What we're seeing in a lot of states is just changes to the regulations. They're still creating allowances. They may be tricky to navigate, but we're doing our best to just respond as fast as we can, continue to give consumers compelling and compliant products, but our ability to do it quickly with owned production, this really creates opportunity, and in some cases is actually helpful. Now, your question of whether California is going to set the precedent for the rest of the country, I think what Minnesota showed really well, and what they did well in their regulations, was create a reasonable tax framework. And within the first year, Minnesota's collecting, I think they're at about $1.5 million a month in tax revenue. And so they created a responsible structure. The regulations were very clear to the players in the market. Like, as a brand, you know exactly what you need to do to be compliant. They controlled the distribution to make it so it's only available at reasonable doses through adult age-gated retail. So they created a responsible marketplace, but also put a tax component behind it that benefits the state. And I think a lot of states are looking at that maybe more closely than they're looking at California, and seeing the opportunity and an example of a way to do it right. So while California just got shut down, we're seeing other markets open up and open up with reasonable frameworks. Open question which way states decide to go, but I think Minnesota's shown there's a great benefit to the people of Minnesota creating a responsible framework with taxation, and I hope that many follow. We very much encourage taxation, and I think it should be in line with alcohol. But ultimately, this is just an entirely new. For markets, it gives you the option, instead of raising taxes on existing products, here's a whole new product category you can apply a tax to and get new tax revenue. So I think it can be a very good thing for many states, and I think regulators are seeing that, and just we talk to regulators in many different markets often, and it's clear that they're not against this. They just don't understand it, and they're trying very hard to find a responsible way to regulate it, and they're very open to input on ways to do so.
And that's great points there. And I think that you're right. I do think that states are looking at the example of Minnesota, seeing how quickly they were able to get their operation up and going. And as you just mentioned, the new tax revenue that's just there immediately from this new market that heretofore did not exist. So rather than, upping the gas tax, upping the grocery tax, whatever, you create this whole new category. And I do think that states are certainly taking note of that. We've got a few states on the ballot here, and just, a little over, a little less than 2 weeks away from when we're recording this here, that, Florida, I think South Dakota is also going to be voting on some cannabis measures. So to that point, I do think that you're right, and states are definitely taking notice. Angus, I want to ask a little about you. I mentioned earlier that, you were an engineer with Tesla and SpaceX, and now here you're running a very successful, and like I said, I think the best THC seltzer brand that's out there on shelves right now. What was it that, brought you into the cannabis space? Whether if you're a personal user or if it was just something that you saw sort of excitement in and movement, what was it that sort of brought you into this area here?
Yeah, actually, I wasn't a cannabis consumer before starting WYNK, and the same is true of my two co-founders, Casey Parzik and Sean Sheehan. Sean Sheehan is an energy trader, so his business is looking for discontinuities in markets and capitalizing on them. So the cannabis space as a whole in 2020 and 2021 really caught his eye. And then Casey Parzik is a longtime friend of mine. He had a distillery in Pennsylvania, so sort of background in beverage. And then my background was engineering and technology. You know, I spent a lot of time doing product design, but also manufacturing design. And we were looking at the cannabis space. Sean was very interested in the sort of discontinuities in the market and finding a way to capitalize on it. And Casey and I were thinking about beverage and realized this sort of interstate commerce issue and the reality that it doesn't make sense to build facilities in each state. That's what caught my attention and made me really interested, because I had an idea for, you know, a way to do mobile production and do it cost effectively. So that was sort of the formation of the business, was the three of us in a room kind of drawing out a mobile production system on a napkin. And so I went to work designing and building the original machine that we used. It took a couple months, but that was my focus in the beginning, you know, very much engineering and technology. Use the term loosely, but technology. And then Sean and Casey got to work, you know, getting the right people to build the brand and starting to find the partners in the different states. So that's where we started. You know, it wasn't sort of personal cannabis consumption.
Sure.
That hooked either of us. But I will say the one thing that was really sort of enlightening in the beginning was playing with formulation and trying to figure out what this product should be. We didn't know that we wanted a 0-calorie, low-dose drink. We were trying all sorts of things. But when we did a very low-dose drink, a 2.5 milligram drink that, you know, if you have one and you have no tolerance and no prior cannabis experience, you feel it, but it, much like you do beer or wine, it's not very dramatic.
Right.
And when we tried that and we had the 0-calorie thing, we didn't know what it was yet, that gave you no hangover, but still gave you a social buzz. That was what really sort of formed the foundation for everything that we built and made us realize how big this opportunity is. Like, man, if you can create a directly adjacent product to alcoholic RTDs that doesn't give you a hangover and is offered at the same price, like what more do consumers want than that?
Yeah.
Now we had some challenges in the beginning trying to push those low dose products through dispensaries because the consumers, that's just not what the dispensary consumer was looking for.
Sure. Most of them have tolerances. Yeah.
Yeah. But what we saw, you know, a year and a half ago when we started placing these products in liquor stores is the demand is absolutely there and this category is growing. You know, it's probably, this is my opinion, but it's also what I'm hearing from, you know, big beverage companies that are not in cannabis. It's likely to be the biggest and the most quickly growing and biggest new beverage category ever since Prohibition.
Totally. I believe that 100%, man. And I just, your point is well taken, and it's, the timing of it is perfect because people of all generations, I think, are, especially in America, but around the world, they're reevaluating their relationship with alcohol. And the younger generations in particular, I'm talking Gen Z and Gen Alpha when they come of age, I think, Gen Z's already shown their relationship with alcohol is very different from all that came before. They really are, a lot of them some of them never drank, some of them who do, it's very light, not even social, like a couple of times a year maybe. And yet their relationship with cannabis is a much more comfortable one. And so, to your point, offering a low dose competitor with no hangover, also no sugars, no calories, those kinds of things, but still provides the social buzz that whether you've got a tolerance or not, it's going to fade an hour later after you've had a great time and leave no, evidence that it was there in the first place. That's fantastic, and I think that there are a lot of people looking for it, and also the whether coming from a place of personal consumption, whether you were into it before becoming legal, I don't think that really matters at all. I say on the show all the time, this is a big party and there's room for everybody. It is. You brought up Prohibition. I said I don't think that there's anything comparable to this since Prohibition, because alcohol was legal, then it was not, then like 13 years later, it's back legal again. So you just have this, and people didn't stop drinking during that time. They were just now forced to do it in speakeasies and in a way that was much more under the radar. And cannabis, people have been using it for long time, and they, in this country since, last century, they had to do it under the radar. Now we've got this slow moving legalization effort here, and all the people, the markets, and then as well as you bring in the innovation stuff that you guys are doing at WYNK and that is happening in this space overall, giving people new products, new things to try. There has been nothing as exciting as this going overnight. The potential of use, the things that people want from it. It's there in a big way. And so I totally believe it, to your point, that it is going to be that largest beverage category since then. It makes a lot of sense to me. And let me just ask one final question, Angus, since, it is, coming from engineering and tech into this space, how do you find it? What's the vibe and just working in it? What's this like compared to your old jobs?
Yeah, it's incredibly complex from a regulatory standpoint. We're always having to sort of adapt our strategy to the regulations, and we do, make a huge effort to be compliant and work with regulators. It's not really a war. It's more, okay, what can we do with our products to meet the rules that are created for each state? So that's in a way fun because it just forces us to be extremely flexible and dynamic and sort of change our strategy and be really creative in how we solve a lot of problems that we don't have complete control over. So from that standpoint, it's extremely challenging, but really fun. There's never a dull day. Rules in a market are likely to change every single week. Mm-hmm. But because we put so much focus in production and really vertical integration since we started the company, it's given us a way of really an advantage and an ability to change the products very quickly, but still deliver the quality and consistency that consumers expect. The thing that's new to me that's been fun and fun sort of applying a engineering point of view to is the lobbying and communication with regulators and like really trying to frame up fair and reasonable arguments that provide a win for everybody. Minnesota showed a great example of how you do this, but putting together the right materials to educate regulators that are new to cannabis on the complexities of this space, it's an interesting challenge. But I think that's the key for all the players in the market. Like the better we can educate regulators and provide reasonable frameworks that are good, both for the people in the industry, but also the consumers and the states and federal government as well. That's a hard problem and a fun one to try and solve. So we spend a lot of time talking to regulators, and it's incredibly complex. Just these distinctions between marijuana and hemp. Why are they different? How are they different? How do you track it? What's the chain of custody? What's the testing process? All these things, it ends up being very complicated, but an interesting problem for us to try and distill that down into something that's easily understandable and can ultimately be used to form proper regulations. It's been fun. I think the engineering approach is the right approach, but certainly something sort of new for me. Very different than designing a product. Yeah,
I bet. And I love that. I love the story, and I love it that, it's just another example of kind of how this space can attract and welcome, people of all types. And there are a lot of big problems to solve right now. And all of us also get to be the beneficiaries of not only your solutions, but along the way, the great products that you have also made and can distribute to states across the country, like the WYNK THC Seltzer, which, listener, if you haven't tried it yet, can't recommend it to you highly enough. You can head to drinkwynk, WYNK.com, and find find out store nearest you where it's located. And definitely check out the new cran blood orange flavor. Even if you've tried Wynk before, you owe it to yourself to give that a shot because it is really stellar and it's perfect for fall. And, we've been talking about how it can sub in for alcohol easily. If you've got a bonfire going, if you've got, a cooler full of beverages with people, or you've got some kind of, outdoor concert, or maybe, some sort of leaf burning party or these other things people do in fall, Wynk is absolutely perfect for it. So make sure to make a note of that for your next gathering. And CEO of Wynk, Angus Rittenberg, thank you so much for stopping by today and sharing some perspective and talking about how difficult it is to bring products like this to market. But we're all certainly glad you did.
Well, thanks for the opportunity to tell our story. And again, appreciate the kind words on our products.
And there you have it, listener. I'd like to thank one more time my guest, CEO of Wynk, Angus Rittenberg, who has what a story, going from Tesla and SpaceX now to the cannabis space and bringing a real engineer's perspective to the problems of drink distribution. Talking with him, talking to the GM of Warehouse Beverage, Phil McFarland. If you haven't heard that interview, I talked with him last year. You should check it out because there is so much great information about what they've done to solve the problem of beverage distribution in a market like this where you need to do everything state by state because those are the laws in this weird cannabis land that we're living in. Each state's like its own island in terms of cannabis laws. So how in the world are you supposed to make a cannabis beverage uniformly to give everyone the same experience, but do it all differently state by state? Wynk and Warehouse Beverages have solved that problem with some innovation on the production side of things. I thought that was a really fascinating conversation. I hope you did as well. If you haven't tried Wynk, you really should. My personal favorite flavor of theirs is the black cherry, although the limited time flavor that they put out around Halloween last year, the cran blood orange, that is probably my actual favorite flavor. But because it was limited time, the black cherry is the one that's available all the time that I think is the best bang for your buck. But you really can't go wrong. And these THC seltzers are here to stay. And I am so glad they're here. And the more of them that come out, competition's going to drive the prices down. Eventually, fingers crossed, they will be at the same price point as like a typical 6-pack of beer. And now, in my opinion, we would really be cooking with gas when that's the case. So, on to a few more news stories that I wanted to bring to your attention. The first one is that the Wisconsin governor wants to let voters legalize cannabis by putting it on the ballot. This article came out earlier this week. It's Marijuana Moment. Publication name aside, they do great work there. You should support them. I've linked this article below, as I always do. This would be Governor Tony Evers. He said during a press conference that he'll include a proposal in his budget this year to give citizens the right to put forward ballot initiative to enact statutory or constitutional policy changes if a majority of voters approve them. So, you listeners in Wisconsin who have been driving over the Illinois border, driving across the Cheddar Curtain, here into the land of Lincoln to buy cannabis products, this is your chance. Get your friends together, get signatures on a ballot, and make that change if you want it. No skin off my back either way. Illinois will certainly take the tax dollars, continue to anyway. But Evers says in this article, quote, "The will of the people should be the law of the land. Republican lawmakers have repeatedly worked to put constitutional amendments on the ballot that Republicans drafted and Republicans passed, all while Republicans refuse to give that same power to the people of Wisconsin. And that's wrong." End quote. At the presser last Friday, Evers specifically mentioned that there's majority support for, quote, "legalizing and taxing marijuana like we do alcohol, as well as other issues like abortion rights, gun safety, and increasing funding for public education. Yet, quote, Republican legislators have repeatedly ignored the will of people of Wisconsin." End quote. So, that is something that is right now brewing up in Wisconsin. So if that's of any interest to you, if you know people in Wisconsin, let them know about this because that could be a big change for them in the very near future. And last story here for you. This is a big one. New evidence shows DEA opposes cannabis rescheduling and should be removed from hearings, according to cannabis groups. Another article from Marijuana Moment, this one by Kyle Yeager. This lists attorneys for a cannabis company and advocacy group. They're set to testify in the DEA's rescheduling hearing process, which starts later this month. And they say new evidence has come to light revealing that the agency actually opposes the proposed rule it is supposed to defend and has engaged in improper communications with other opponents of the reform. The company and the advocacy group is Village Farms International and Hemp for Victory. Laid out their claims in a motion requesting the DEA administrative law judge overseeing the hearing reconsider their earlier request to remove the agency as the proponent of the proposed rule to move cannabis from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3 under the CSA. Part of the motion addresses a new declaration submitted to the judge by a DEA official last week, wherein the agency pharmacologist seemed to question the basis of the reclassification proposal by echoing, quote, anti-rescheduling talking points, attempting to show that marijuana has a high abuse potential and no currently accepted medical use. End quote, the cannabis groups said in their latest motion. It says DEA based its analysis on a legal test that was previously rejected by the Justice Department's Office of Legal Counsel, and the agency's defiance of OLC's binding opinion is stunning proof of its open hostility to the proposed rule. Specifically, when assessing whether marijuana has currently accepted medical value, DEA used a 5-factor review that OLC has described as, quote, impermissibly narrow. End quote, running counter to the 2-factor review standard applied by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services to reach conclusion to recommend rescheduling. What's more, the attorney said the timing of the DEA's declaration filing is further evidence that DEA opposes the policy change, noting that the agency was statutorily required to submit any relevant data on the proposed rule before HHS carried out its scientific review and the rulemaking process was formally initiated. Now, this article goes on quite a bit further. I've linked it below. Always encourage you to follow along or read it for yourself. The reason I bring this up is the same reason that I brought it up last year all throughout that process, and why I will continue to bang this drum until it is rescheduled or until we actually get some fair, just look into the classification of cannabis here. I will say this into this microphone as long as I possibly can. The DEA does not want cannabis to be rescheduled. They never have. It is messing with their bacon. What do I mean by that? It is directly contradictory to their self-interest. The money they get from the federal government, the control over the operations around the country, the amount of agents within their district or purview that they get to send out to places to snatch up legal cannabis products in places like New Mexico, which is a story that's real. I went over it in an episode last year. DEA agents went to a business, a legal, reputable business in New Mexico, and snatched up all their cannabis product, saying, too bad, so sad, federally the laws haven't changed, so this is ours now. Piss off. This is not hard to see or understand. The same people who have been enforcing these archaic laws, which never should have been on the books in the first place, the same people who instituted this prohibition in the first place are now being asked their opinion about the medical value of cannabis and whether or not it should be scheduled at a lower classification. Shocker, they don't. This is just, it's a little bit mind-blowing to me. And that's why I continue to share these articles, mainly just because I'm glad other people see it. And I don't feel like I'm just alone shouting into this void here. I know that the administrative law judge is never going to remove the DEA from these proceedings. It's just not going to happen. But it would be nice if they could be muzzled somehow. If maybe they could be, relegated to a silent observer and just had to watch as this policy changes and the prohibition ends slowly. I would love that. But it's frustrating to continually see them with their thumb on the scale talking to anti-cannabis legalization groups like Smart Approaches to Marijuana, who's constantly sending these emails filled with last century's propaganda and these anti-cannabis talking points. And these people are allowed a seat at the table where they're deciding this thing. It's just frustrating. But anyway, again, I've linked that article below, and I do think that this is worth keeping an eye on, paying attention to, and as frustrating as it is to me, I'm going to keep doing it, and I'll keep sharing these updates with you because that is the responsibility that I have chosen to undertake here on the Cannabis Man Podcast. Really frustrated right now. I wish I could go and smoke a joint to relieve some stress, but still in dry January. I've still got, still about 3 weeks. So I'll just have to fantasize about the day when I can return to...
I'm getting high on reefer.
Yes, as Niles Crane says in Frasier, that's what I'll be doing on February 1st, and I can't wait to return to that. But before I let you go, I will sort of calm us all down. I will take a deep breath, do a little bit of this meditative breathing here, and I'll bring us all back to a little closer to center with this week's High Haiku. Reg Kiefer, take it away. New Year's winds whisper, dreams of green horizons bloom, future dances bright. Whoa, that's deep. First high haiku of 2025. Yeah, very, very well said. Thanks a lot, Reg, and thank you, listener, for putting up with that. I apologize for everything, and I really appreciate you checking out the Cannabis Man Podcast. Be sure to leave a rating or review for the show. Got a lot to look forward to, a lot I'm excited about in this year, 2025. There is so much going on. There is going to be a lot of big events, a huge one, maybe none bigger than one from Illinois News Joints in May. I will share more details about that when I can, and I'll be back again next week with some more interviews with experts talking about news stories, product reviews, and perspective from myself and others looking at this continuing journey and expansion of the green frontier. All of that for you on the Cannabis Man Podcast. Be sure to spend time with those you love. Have a great weekend, and we'll talk next week. Bye-bye. Cannabis Man is 100% originally crafted by myself, Don Kleppin. Original theme music written and composed by Yusu Kim, aka Good Son.